Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is arrive. Let's take a moment to look at some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you're likely to hear arrive used is to mean to reach a particular destination. We're just ending a large or long holiday weekend here in the United States. There were many people traveling, and so I imagine many people were using this verb to describe when does the plane reach a particular destination? When does it arrive? Or maybe you were texting with family or friends that were driving to a particular destination and asking them, when will you arrive? When are you going to reach that particular place? A second way the verb arrive gets used is to mean to be brought or delivered. So, with this second definition, think about packages, things that come in the mail. They get delivered to your house. You might even receive a text message now letting you know that a package has arrived. A third way the verb arrive gets used is to mean for an event or a moment to happen or come. So, with this particular meaning, maybe you've heard the phrase, the time has arrived for, right? Could be a certain event. Um, for some people, the month of May is a time for graduations from high school, college, maybe other programs. So, graduation has arrived. The moment is here. A fourth way you'll hear arrive used is to mean to come into existence or use. So, with this fourth definition, many people think of new products, new things that are being sold or developed. And we'll see an example of this meaning a little later in the video. A fifth way you might hear arrive used is in connection to the birth of a new baby, right? So, might ask somebody who is expecting a child, right? When is the baby going to arrive, right? When do you think, right? It's always a bit of a guess. Many times we can't know for sure. Sometimes that's more under the baby's control than it is ours. But that's another way you hear the verb arrive used. A sixth way you can hear the verb arrive used is to mean to achieve success or recognition. So I feel like with this particular definition, it's really common to hear it used in connection to the arts. So you might hear that a particular singer or actor has arrived, right? They have achieved success. They're recognized by many people, not just a small group or just their friends and family. You should know that arrive is a regular verb. To form the progressive tense, or any tenses in the progressive, I should say, you're going to drop the E and then add ing to form arriving. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made just by adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, arrive, ends in a V sound, and V sounds are voiced. This means that the ed ending is just going to make a D sound, and we're not going to add an extra syllable as we say it. It should sound like this: arrived, arrived. Okay. Now, there are a few phrasal verbs that you will encounter with arrive. The first one we'll discuss today is to arrive at. This can have a couple different meanings. One would be tying back to that first definition of reaching a destination. And you're going to notice here in a moment, many of these phrasal verbs mean to reach a destination, but we use them just slightly differently. So we're going to use arrive at when we're talking about a location, a building, or a time. Let's take a look at an example sentence. We arrived at the office before 7 a.m. So here we can see that preposition at being followed by the office. Here's a location, right? And we might also be describing a particular building. You'll hear people say things like, we arrived at our appointment. And again, that would be for a location. We arrived at 7 a.m. That would work there as well. So location, a building, or a time. Now, a second way we use arrive at is to mean to reach something through giving a great deal of effort or some type of process. So, an example of this might be, have you arrived at a decision yet? Right? So here, this might be kind of a very serious choice, right? Not you deciding between coffee and tea, right? Something that might be really easy or simple to do. Here, what we would mean is maybe somebody has been thinking about something for hours, days, maybe even weeks or months, and working through, well, if I do this, this will happen, and maybe they're talking to people, and eventually they reach the decision, or we're asking if they have, I guess, in this example. Let's move on to another phrasal verb you might encounter, arrive in. Again, this goes back to that first meaning. So we're talking about reaching a destination, but this time what follows our preposition in frequently is going to be a city, a country, a month, or a year. When will they arrive in New York City? Right? So obviously that's a city. Might ask, will they arrive in July? Right? That would be a month, as an example. Okay. Our last phrasal verb is to arrive on. Again, this goes back to that idea of reaching a particular destination, but this time we're going to focus on a day of the week or a particular date. So you might think kind of month and day number, month, day, and year, all of those could work. An example of this might be the package arrived on Friday. Okay, so those at, in, on, I know sometimes really confusing, but I hope these examples and explanations help with your understanding. Now let's move on and do a little more verb tense practice with our verb of the day. Today, we're going to practice the simple past tense and the past perfect. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that were completed or finished at a known point in the past. And the nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our structure is going to be the same no matter what our subject is. So we don't have to kind of remember differences. It's all going to follow the same pattern. And what you're going to notice in the affirmative or positive sentences here is that we're going to have our subject and then we're going to have the ed form of our verb here because this is a regular verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. Smartphones arrived in the mid 2000s. Okay, so remember that earlier definition about a new product, a new technology kind of becoming available? This sentence goes back to that meaning. Now, if I want to make a negative sentence in the simple past tense, I'm going to do that by starting with my subject, then did not, and then the base verb. So notice I'm not using the ed form here in my negative. Here's another example sentence. The baby didn't arrive before her due date. Okay, so sometimes doctors, medical professionals will kind of make an estimate as to when they think the baby will arrive, will be born. And whatever that date that was set here, the baby did not arrive before it. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, I start with did, then I have my subject, and then the base verb. Again, I am not adding ed to the end of this verb in my yes or no question. I'm only adding that ed ending in the affirmative, the positive sentences. So let's look at one last example in the simple past tense. Did the police arrive quickly? So perhaps this is a question that's it's part of a conversation. Someone's describing what's happened at a particular point in the past. And you'll notice here, not all of my examples have time signals. Words like yesterday, last week, a specific date, because that can be just part of our conversation. Once it's already stated and then it's sort of understood, we don't have to keep repeating it. Now let's take a moment and talk about the past perfect. This verb tense gets used many times in connection with the simple past tense, but the past perfect exists to really note that one action occurred before the event that is in simple past tense. Now, not every sentence that has past perfect will also have simple past tense, and those you might see other phrases using the time signal before. Again, that is really the focus of this verb tense, noting something was completed before a certain point in time or before another action. To make the past perfect, I need two parts to my verb. I'm going to use the past form of have, and that's had, and then I use the participle form of my verb. Now, in the past perfect, my sentence structure is going to stay the same no matter what my subject is. So I'm going to have, in the affirmative or the positive, I'm going to have my subject, I'll have had, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's an example. The time had arrived for rebellion. I borrowed this story from a piece of literature, right? So kind of describing um, what is to come, right? And noting, right? This happens first, and now in the sentences will follow, we'll learn what's happening next. If I want to make a negative past perfect sentence, then I need to have my subject, then had not, and then the participle form of the verb. You might also hear the contraction hadn't, and then the participle. Here's another example sentence. Her luggage hadn't arrived by the time the wedding ceremony started. Ooh. I saw a sentence describing somebody, or a story, I should say, describing some challenges some people who were getting married had experienced as they tried to get certain items to destination weddings. And this I thought was a good example of that definition of something being brought or delivered. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, I start with had, then I have my subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's another example. Had they arrived before the fight started? Okay. So here, maybe with this question, I'm trying to understand the sequence of events. What happened first, then what came next? Okay. Now let's spend a moment looking at some words and phrases related to our verb arrive. And the first word we're going to talk about is the noun arrival. This can have a few different meanings. One would be to refer to the action or process of arriving at some place or reaching some destination. An example of this might be her arrival in her hometown was celebrated. Right? So, kind of maybe imagine someone moves away, pursues some sort of interest, becomes very famous, and now this person comes back, right? And that process of reaching the destination is celebrated. A second way you'll hear arrival used is to refer to a person who has arrived somewhere. An example of this: how many late arrivals will there be? Right? So we're asking how many people are going to reach this particular spot, but do so later than what is expected. A third way you'll hear arrival used is to refer to the emergence or the appearance of some new development, a new phenomenon, some new product. An example of this might be the community had been preparing for the arrival of EVs for several months. So here, EV is an electric vehicle. Here, I borrowed this sentence that was specifically talking about a military base, installing more chargers, making sure there was infrastructure to support these types of vehicles. Another related word you might encounter is the noun arriver. This is really just someone who has arrived in a particular place or someone who arrives. An example of this might be she was a late arriver to the sport, but she has excelled for the last 2 seasons. So Here, this particular meaning might be talking about someone who has picked up a particular sport or activity a little bit later in their youth. I don't know. From this sentence, we don't know exactly how old this person is, but later than maybe what is expected or what is considered kind of normal. The last phrase we're going to talk about today is to arrive at blank on the dot. So maybe you've heard this phrase before, but we're talking about reaching a destination, arriving at some location at the exact time specified. So people use this to suggest you better not be late. So arrive at is always going to be followed by a number, a time, right? And you can see that in my example here. He needs to arrive at 9 o'clock on the dot, right? So what I'm trying to suggest with that sentence, if I'm saying it to someone else, is this person cannot be late. Don't show up at 9:05. Don't show up at 9:10. 9 o'clock. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.